So a little bit ahead of time, but still we can't hold back here. So we're going to kick off with discussing and outlining ICDA's future and how we think about shaping and reshaping our efforts. So Dr. Ben Neale from the Broad Institute will take us through this.
Thank you, Cecilia. So it is my distinct pleasure to describe for you ICDA's future directions. We've experienced quite an interesting couple of years over the pandemic, and I think it's led us to do some soul searching and deep consideration and evaluation of exactly how we want to take ICDA forward. And that touches on questions of scientific direction, but also administrative organization, as well as sort of what should our identity as an organization be? How should we organize our behavior? How should we organize our activities? And what principles should we carry forward? And so to do that, we take as a bedrock principle of ICDA the importance of diversity and inclusiveness across multiple different axes. I think for those of you that saw Nikki's talk yesterday on the kind of output of the equity group, I think the opportunity to really try and address some of these long-standing inequities in genomic sciences, there's no better time than now, and ICDA is deeply committed to that particular mission. We've also been sort of wrestling with the ways to ensure that we do kind of create an open environment, open community, a big tent philosophy for how we, tackle this maps to mechanisms to medicine challenge that is before us. And so with those sorts of goals and bit of backdrop, we formed a subgroup to focus on developing a set of guiding principles to really clarify what the core functions of ICDA really are. There've been a lot of questions about what is ICDA and what isn't it. And also to touch on how we continue to develop administrative structures that will support these core scientific functions and goals that we have to realize the promise of human genetic inquiry. And so with that, we spun up a subgroup drawing from across our organizing committee and from across our community and across the world in an effort to really wrestle with these questions of what should ICDA do, how should it do it, how should it organize itself. It's truly been a pleasure to engage with this set of individuals to build out a vision for how ICDA can operate as effectively and impactfully as possible. And so we developed a set of guiding principles. This was our kind of first set of activities. And I'll not read each one of them because I really dislike reading slides, but I'm just going to give everyone about, kind of a 10, 20 second count to give a read. And I'll talk about them after you've had a chance to read. So these principles are also available on ICDAbio. They really cut across what our mission is, which is improving human health and globally, but they also talk about how we approach that mission, balancing individual investigator agency with the goals of open science and really accelerating the science as fast as possible, ensuring the rigor and reproducibility of the work that we do. I think one of the things that I am most impressed by the human genomics community in general is that commitment to rigor, reproducibility, openness, and transparency of science. These insights have to be durable if we are going to be at the start of the pipeline, right? This is maps to mechanisms to medicines. And we all want to make sure that those medicines make a difference in people's lives and really treat the common diseases that we're all around the table to try and work on. And so that commitment to reproducibility, that commitment to openness, that commitment to accelerating science is really the heart of ICDA. And that's really the kind of foundation of our overall approach to how we think about developing community resources, developing scientific projects, developing training programs and different activities. And so with these principles, we then also turn to what are the kind of core functions. And the 5 major functions that we've identified include things like convening. So both the scientific plenary, which I think has a convening element, and a kind of distribution and dissemination of science element to it is part of that. But it's also about fostering collaboration, about bringing groups of investigators together from across the world that share a common goal, that we all want to understand why people are getting sick, and we all want to work to improve our management and treatment of all of these common diseases. And so the opportunity to convene groups of investigators, to bring the community together, to get large-scale cohort biobanks talking to one another, to develop approaches for how we pursue the mechanistic insights of that genetic results might teach us together across disease areas. That is all very much in the spirit of ICDA and the spirit of our strategic coordination and convening kinds of functions. We also provide a great deal of support. So we staff efforts like the Latin Genomes Project that you heard a little bit about yesterday, as well as other kind of ongoing collaborative efforts to, in some instances, create or develop projects like the Latin Genomes, or in other instances to develop recommendations and kind of considerations that can help guide policymakers in making decisions, like we saw with the readout from the PRS task force from Mike and Kristen yesterday. At the very bottom, you see this vision setting, and ICDA, in a sense, really launched with the development of the recommendations. And in the subgroup discussion, that recommendation process was recognized as being super valuable. It really sort of charted a course for the community in the field of what it is that we need to tackle, what do we need to take on to really advance the science and advance the impact of the science into really delivering on this promise of human genetics that I think a lot of us have been talking about for a very long time. And that vision setting process is another core component of our community, because we want to make sure that the science that we're doing is responsive to the needs of all of the key stakeholders around the table, be they the funders, the academic scientists pursuing this, or the scientists in industrial settings, be they technology companies or pharmaceutical companies. ICDA really is trying to just bring these constituencies together and work on a shared vision of what is possible with human genetic inquiry. To drill into these functions a little bit further, you can sort of give you can see the examples written out on these slides. We interface with other groups, we distribute the outputs. These plenaries, I think, are a real testament to how much exciting science is happening across the community and how much progress is being made, even in the face of the kind of COVID pandemic landscape that we're all kind of struggling underneath. But it's also this exciting moment in our journey. We know how to find the genetic basis of pretty much any human phenotype now. I don't think that was necessarily the case 20 years ago, where it was maybe not super clear exactly how to prosecute the genetic discovery aspects. And while we've gotten really good at genetic discovery, it's clearly not uniformly deployed across all different common diseases out there. And I think obviously biobanks offer a tremendous opportunity to address some of that imbalance. But it also gives us structures to immediately respond to new diseases. So the COVID Host Genetics Initiative that was sort of spun up and supported by ICDA, I think has made tremendous strides in understanding genetic and identifying genetic variants, and even potentially nominating specific, hypotheses about additional interventions that might help deal with COVID. And I think that's just an absolutely perfect illustration of what we can achieve if we work together, if we bring the community together, if we and build environments where anyone can contribute what they can to an effort to really understand something about what makes us sick and what makes us vulnerable to these kinds of illnesses. This strategic coordination point at the end has been focused on developing a set of projects. You'll hear a little bit more about that in a town hall that we'll announce at the end and talk about, but it's also really about trying to get to grips with what do we know in this M to M to M space. So Eric Thalmann's talk yesterday on kind of creating a gold standard set of genes is another great example of where we can bring experts together, try and get a consensus on what, clear common variants are associated to specific gene products in a way that we may not understand the specific genomic mechanism, but we can be quite confident about the link between SNP and gene. So let me also be clear about what ICDA is not doing. So ICDA is by no means a monolithic mammoth project. This is not the Human Genome Project. I think Mark's keynote yesterday really described where we are, what the opportunities are, and how there isn't a single monolithic project that I think would really speak to all of the questions that are posed by everything that we've discovered about human genetics as it relates to common disease in the last decade. We in no way want to compete or engulf or even distract from other ongoing distinct efforts. We hope to be, kind of collaborative and, and kind of act as an accelerant rather than something that slows things down. And we celebrate other efforts quite readily and comfortably and enjoy collaborating with other large-scale initiatives that are operating in a similar space. And finally, and most importantly, ICDA is not a funding organization. I think this is perhaps the question that we receive most frequently, and it is not ICDA's remit to fund. ICDA can bring communities together. It can convene meetings and discussions around key questions in the field and what it'll take to sort of surmount those barriers to really realize the promise of human genetics. But it is not going to be acting as a funder. We do partner with funders. We have a sort of pharma council who may, also engage in some of these considerations. We've got funders that are at the table and involved and aware of the discussions, but ICDA itself is not funding. And then, I think this is the last slide that I'll present, which is more on the administrative organization piece. We have supported a lot of different activities in a lot of different ways, but we recognize that the International Common Disease Alliance should, in its very core, be international, and it should really try to the best of our ability to represent as many people across the world as possible. And so we have moved from 2 co-chairs to a 7-person executive committee. We are rotating ICDA's organizing committee membership as a sort of, in a sense, a kind of senatorial body to help not only work with the executive committee, but also to sort of form and nucleate work groups, much like you saw over the course of the sessions yesterday. We are working on developing a scientific advisory board to provide input on the direction and evaluating the work group's remit regularly in an effort to ensure that they are actually speaking to this core goal of accelerating maps to mechanisms to medicines, as well as meeting the needs of the community. And that means meeting the needs of the community everywhere, not just in one place. And then finally, I don't think we give enough credit to Rachel Leal and Kate Balakonis for all of their hard work behind the scenes in terms of making this whole operation run. Truly, Kate has been a superstar, and if you have yet to meet or interact with Kate, I cannot kind of sing her praises highly enough. She truly keeps us on target and on track, because I think sometimes scientists get a little too excited about the science and forget a little bit about the real world details of making everything work together. But how to expand ICDA's executive office across the set of the, perhaps executive committee, and how to kind of build a more durable and further internationalize our efforts to ensure that we can sort of foster, convene, develop, and accelerate science across the world is another key part of the mission. And so with this, I'll turn the floor over to Mark. Mark, let me know when you're ready to take it away.
I wanted to give a little bit of an introduction as to what the process that we undertook. So at the recommendation of the organizing of the subgroup of the organizing committee with respect to reconfiguring the executive management of the ICDA we set out a process by which a more broadly representative executive committee could be defined to take the role of what the 2 co-chairs essentially had been serving for the last couple of years. Now, keeping in mind that, I agreed to take on the co-chair role, as a temporary gig, now, I guess a year and change ago. I was not personally nominating myself or having anyone else nominate me to join the new executive committee. Instead, I served as a sort of mini group leader for evaluating the applications and essentially formulating from the votes of the ICDA organizing committee the final slate of the executive committee. And the process essentially went that there was a broad, an open process of nominations from the ICDA community. These could be self-nominations or other person nominating you nominations, in which we then confirmed with the person being nominated that they were willing to serve on the executive committee were they selected. And then votes tabulated from the organizing committee members to form the final slate. And a shout out to Nancy Cox, Judy Cho, and Mark McCarthy, who joined me in the task of essentially counting the votes and making sure everything was done in an above board fashion. That turned out to be not a terrifically challenging or demanding task. So if we flip to the next page, the voting arrived at the 7-person executive committee consisting of the people shown on this slide. And we were quite pleased with the nominations and then with the votes after that there was a very good distribution of potential candidates from around the world, and the final voting came out in this fashion. So there was no reason to think anything other than this is a great and diverse in terms of their expertise group of individuals to help lead the ICDA into its next phases. So my warm congratulations to all of these individuals, Cecilia, Nicole, Nikki, Partha, Yuki, Andres, and Ben. And welcome to the entire community to the ICDA Executive Committee that will help chart the course, as been described, for not only the types of activities that the ICDA takes on, but really the core ethos and how the ICDA operates to take on those tasks and to do it in a way that is consistent with the mission points that have been brought forward. So that's the majority of what I had to say, which is welcome. And it's been a pleasure to, on an interim basis, help shepherd the ICDA through its growth in the last year. And I'm really, enthusiastic both about the science and the ideas that we're hearing at the meeting, but also about, seeing something which began, 4 years ago as a small idea, now develop into, a really, truly distributed responsibility for researchers around the world that will, I think, by its distribution, ensure that the products of what we all attempt to do in human genetics and beyond will benefit everyone around the world. And as a side note, others who were nominated but not selected to join the executive committee, and several others in addition, will be joining on to the existing ICDA organizing committee to help, again, increase the representation and expertise of researchers around the world, to guide and serve as a much broader base of information and ideas for the executive committee to take forward. And finally, just another housekeeping note, save the date for the ICDA community town halls, which will take place on April 20 and 21, just a month and change from now.